2020 has been quite a year, and we've all seen things that we never thought were possible. War in the streets, worldwide shutdowns, and iron-fisted control over our daily lives. Things that none of us have ever experienced, and before 2020, didn't even think was possible. And even though you've learned so much, it's time to graduate to the next level. This story goes much deeper. How deep, you ask? Well, as deep as it gets. What if I told you that we're living through a conspiracy so vast, so twisted, and so outright bizarre, that the only way that you're going to believe it is to see it for yourself? And to really understand the hidden hand controlling our present, there's no better place to start than to realize that there's something very, very wrong with the story of our past.
Imagine the entire span of recorded human history, about 5,000 years. Double it, 10,000 years, to the time when plants are domesticated and agriculture begins. Double it again, 20,000 years. Ice Age hunters are painting stunning images on cave walls.
And 99.9% of the most highly respected academics will tell you that this is how humans developed. The only problem, it's a goddamn lie. What if tens of thousands of years before what we've been told to be the dawn of our first civilization, there existed a culture so advanced that it reached across the entire globe? It mastered its environment, and even had a deep relationship with the natural world that might even surpass what we know today. If anything like that were true, there'd be evidence. However, what complicates things is an event in our distant past.
There's a sudden radical change in climate. The temperature drops massively. The global temperature just plunges to as cold as it was at the coldest point of the Ice Age. And this episode lasts for 1,200 years. And then equally mysteriously, global temperature rockets up. I mean, these changes in temperature are gigantic.
Author and researcher Graham Hancock is one of the most dedicated proponents of the lost global civilization theory. And in my opinion, he's a total badass. For the past 25 years, Graham has traveled the world, fearlessly standing up to pretty much the entire academic orthodoxy. And in May of 2017, Graham, along with his colleague, respected geological theorist Randall Carlson, appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Randall cites the mass extinctions of every land mammal in North America bigger than a coyote as evidence of this violent cataclysm.
Most of the extinctions did occur between roughly 13,000 and 11,600 years ago. The cave bears, the short-faced bear, the giant beavers, the giant armadillos, the ground sloths that were the size of giraffes, 4 species of mammoths, extinct on 4 continents. And to me, like, wait a second.
So, exactly what kind of cataclysm are we talking about?
The comet impact theory is very controversial, but the evidence has been steadily mounting now for a decade.
Including physical evidence, right? Like the core samples that show nuclear glass.
Yes, most of it's dating to 12,800 to 13,000 years ago.
The nanodiamonds, iridium, and nuclear melt glass known as trinitite found in these layers can only be formed on Earth by events such as nuclear explosions, lightning strikes, and extraterrestrial impact events. Other theories argue that it was the result of unusual solar activity. Either way, what the Earth went through was sudden and incredibly destructive. If an advanced global culture existed 13,000 plus years ago, it wouldn't be hard to see how such an event would remove almost all trace of them.
For the moment, archaeologists are not interested in and apparently completely unaware of the fact that an extinction-level cataclysm took place on this planet between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, right in the foundations of the edifice of history that they have built. And that surely has to shake everything up. The possibility that the myths of a former golden age, which was destroyed in a global cataclysm involving flood and fire, now must be taken extremely seriously.
And even though it's assumed that our development has been mapped out in detail, discoveries that contradict everything are everywhere, such as the absolutely massive Göbekli Tepe in southeast Turkey,
We have a body of archaeology that megalithic sites date to no older than 5,500 to 6,000 years old. There are no older sites than that. Then along comes Göbekli Tepe, 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. If we take what's still under the ground into account, we're looking at the largest megalithic site that's ever been created on Earth.
Not to mention that at the time it was constructed, humans had yet to develop agriculture, the domestication of animals, pottery, or even the wheel.
I must say, Göbekli Tepe strikes me as a gigantic fucking mystery. It confronts us. It challenges the mainstream model. I think it's reasonable to consider the possibility that there was something more than just hunter-gatherers involved here in creating this extraordinary place.
But it isn't just Göbekli Tepe. There are many other mysterious structures that totally contradict the story that we've been given about our past. But maybe the most single interesting thing about many ancient sites from around the world is not when they were built, but where. If you plot the ancient sites on a world map, you'll notice something very peculiar. The line that connects the Nazca Lines in Peru to the pyramids in Giza is part of a 25,000 mile long, 60 mile wide path that connects several major ancient sites worldwide. Starting in Nazca, Peru, the line continues straight down Peru's Sacred Valley and right over Ollantaytambo and just next to Machu Picchu, before going right through the ancient capital city of Cusco. From there it passes over Sacsayhuaman and the Pretori Pyramids. If you follow the line across the Atlantic, it goes right through the pyramids of Giza, Petra in Jordan, Ur in Mesopotamia, Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan. In India it crosses over Mohenjo-Daro, then Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Crossing over the Pacific, it passes by this strange tower at the bottom of the ocean according to Google Earth, which I'm sure is just a glitch, before ending right at Easter Island. The meaning of this alignment is still up for speculation, but I'm guessing it's more than a coincidence. But as such mounting evidence continues to be ignored, is it unreasonable to consider the possibility that this information is being kept from us intentionally?
I understood that there were academics with entrenched positions on this subject. I didn't realize how violent it could become and how concerted and organized it could be. I didn't realize that actually the past is an ideological subject in our society, that it is a subject that is therefore tightly controlled as to what we are to know and not know about the past.
And I have a feeling that there's also another big reason why the man doesn't want us to know of a past great civilization. Knowing the truth about our past kinda lets us know our place in the world, and if we ever find out the real truth, we might not like it very much. What if much of the amazing megalithic works of the last ice age were built by people that weren't quite human? Now, I already know what you're gonna say. You're probably gonna tell me that the strange shape and size of these skulls was achieved by artificial means such as head binding, a cultural practice done for thousands of years. But I bet you don't even know the half of it. Deformed domes go back to the beginning of recorded history with Olmecs, but you also have some kind of cranial deformation all throughout Africa and what's today Russia. Attila the Hun and his Rome-sacking horde were said to look extra terrifying because of their grotesquely deformed heads. You also find strange-shaped skulls all throughout Germany, France, Chile, England, and Malta. In North America, head altering was practiced by various tribes such as the aptly named Flathead Indians. In Europe, this practice was widespread up until the Middle Ages, and in nearly every case, the altering of the skulls was practiced exclusively by the royal family and other members of the ruling caste, and almost never by the peasants, with the most striking examples found in Bolivia and Peru. Most examples do appear to be artificially elongated, but some of these skulls stand apart from the rest. The skull of a normal human being is made up of 3 separate plates. This design is crucial because it allows our head to change shape as we pass through the birth canal. However, the oldest and largest of these skulls seem to have 1 bone at the back of the skull, instead of the 2 that fuse into what is called the sagittal suture, which is normal for pretty much all Homo sapiens. But the most important difference is their size. Head-binding humans when they're young can create dramatic changes in the skull's shape. However, these techniques in no way alter the overall volume of the brain cavity. With Homo sapiens, it's about 1200 to about 1800 cc's. The largest of these skulls have a brain cavity volume of around 2500 cc's. This skull from a mummy purchased from grave robbers was examined by forensic specialists, and through dental analysis it was determined that the child was between 18 and 24 months old, too young for binding to create such an enormous effect on the head. And there seems to be little interest in a detailed study of these skulls to see if they're natural. But in 2017, independent researchers were able to carefully collect samples from 18 of the Peruvian skulls and find a series of DNA testing with labs in UCLA, UC Santa Cruz, and Lakehead University in Canada. And when the DNA test results came back, the conclusions were shocking. This species with enormous elongated heads turned out to be aliens. I'm just kidding, they're human. However, the DNA test did reveal that 13 of the 18 skulls were more genetically related to people from the Middle East, specifically the areas of the Black Sea, Caspian Sea, and Crimea, where elongated skulls have also been found. And as far as I know, no one from mainstream academia has come forth to debunk the findings. In fact, the reaction from the scientific community has been unanimous. Utter silence. And maybe that's because some of them already have the answers. Perhaps they already know that not too far in our distant past, there existed a highly intelligent offshoot of the human species with massive elongated heads, who ruled over much of the relatively flat-headed population. And I'll go out on a limb to claim that many of the ruling elite of more recent times wholeheartedly believe that they too are genetic descendants of this alternate line of humanity. If the royal families of today did descend from this not exactly Homo sapien line, then it would sort of shed a little more light on their crazed obsession with the virtues of bloodline rule. Even if you don't have the strongest grasp of history, you're probably somewhat aware of how much importance things like lineage and divine right were to the rulers of up until our not too distant past. It's not such a big deal for middle-class Western society of today, so I think it's a little hard for us to truly comprehend just how big it was, and is. It might be crucial when you literally see your lineage as being a species above the common man. Let's look at the bloodline that the current British royals descended from. Their lineage, which is actually German and not British, can be traced back to generations of ruling dynasties throughout Europe, even to the 15th century despot Vlad the Impaler, the real-life inspiration for the character of Count Dracula in the Bram Stoker novel, which is something they're proud of.
The genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vlad the Impaler, you see. So I do have a bit of a stake in the country.
As it were.
But it's not just one of the most horrible men to ever rule a country who was part of the same family lineage. There's a whole slew of world leaders that came from the same extended family. The bloodline even goes back to the Muslim prophet Muhammad. Even in the land of meritocracy, all US presidents, with the exception of Martin Van Buren, can trace their ancestry to this royal line. Even Barack Obama.
You and Dick Cheney cousins?
You know, listen, I don't think I'm going to family reunion.
Celebrities like Johnny Depp, Madonna, Tom Hanks, Ellen DeGeneres, Brooke Shields, Hugh Hefner, Hugh Grant, Tilda Swinton, Celine Dion, Paris Hilton, Uma Thurman, Michael Douglas, Jake and Maggie Gyllenhaal, Hilary Duff, Robert Pattinson, Angelina Jolie, and Brad Pitt are all distant descendants of this European royal line that can be traced all the way back to King Charlemagne. In the 800s, Charlemagne, as legend would have it, was crowned emperor of pretty much all of Western Europe by Pope Leo III. He then went on to conquer what was granted to him by the Pope in a brutal and cunning military campaign, before eventually dividing the empire amongst his heirs, thus subjecting Europe to over a millennium of inbred, all-in-the-family rule. They believed that they were so special that they even collected their own bowel movements for examination, cataloging, and archiving. The goods were delivered in this custom throne that would travel around with the king or queen wherever they would go. The feces were collected and the royal arse wiped by a very high-ranking nobleman of good standing and good family stock.
The million-dollar question, do you actually wipe the royal bum?
Well, of course, yeah, because you're not just a king, you are a divine body on earth. You are
a divine body on earth.
Therefore, there's no Tom, Dick or Harry that touches your body.
But it wasn't just their prized blood and other bodily fluids that they sought out and sought to keep from others. It was also a vast and detailed lineage of occulted knowledge, most likely passed down from a previous lost age, that they feverishly see as the key to their transcendence. Now, when I say occult, it simply means hidden from view. This is the knowledge that ruling circles have kept to themselves, and that they view as the key to their power. The purpose of this guarded knowledge was to evolve the consciousness into a higher state of existence. They studied this information, wrapped them in rituals, and protected it with often gruesome blood-spilling oaths. And many secret organizations emerged out of the need to protect this occulted knowledge. But to this day, the most powerful secret society is the Knights Templar. As they returned from their crusade in the Holy Land between the 11 and 1300s, it's alleged that the Templars brought back a number of mystical, religious, and spiritual beliefs. They were often accused of worshipping such anti-Christian symbols such as snakes, owls, the hermaphrodite deity Baphomet, and the human sacrifice demanding Baal. Their detractors claim that the Templars were heavily into ritualistic sex magic as a gateway into the spiritual world. And these alternative beliefs seem to serve the Templars well. Even today, their unmistakable symbol, a red cross on a white background, can be seen all over the levers of power. The Templars became so powerful, in fact, that they eventually had to create spin-off orders like the Knights of Malta, a secret society so powerful that it's often considered diplomatically sovereign and maintains separate diplomatic relations with over 100 countries. Another organization created out of the Templars are the Freemasons, whose prominent members are way too many to even count.
I hold that to be self-evident, Brother Franklin. All men are created equal.
Indeed, Brother Washington. All Freemasons meet as equals, and we have an opportunity to create a nation in the very essence of Masonic morality.
And high-ranking Masonic leaders in the US knew perfectly well that their occult knowledge had been passed on from a previous lost age. One Confederate general whose statue was toppled in 2020 was Albert Pike. 33rd degree Freemason and ritual designer of the Ku Klux Klan, Pike's legacy was firmly placed among the memorials of DC. And he wrote about how Freemasonry was in fact a custodian of pre-flood knowledge in his book, Morals and Dogma. And I quote, "That of bronze which survived the flood represents the mysteries of which Masonry is the legitimate successor, handed down from age to age by an unbroken current of tradition, embodied in symbols, emblems, and allegories."
You know, I wonder if other presidents after me will also be Freemasons.
Many are initiated into these mysteries by bloodline. However, to recruit enough lackeys to keep this power structure in place, the bloodline elite often find it necessary to bring in and indoctrinate talented individuals among the privileged class into at least some aspects of this knowledge. And what better place to do this than the seemingly tranquil and esteemed institutions of academia, where a very old and entrenched network of secret societies work to serve the long-term goals of this elite. Swearing allegiance to these secret societies puts its young members on the fast track to success in leadership positions for life, and despite a public front of philanthropy and goodwill, they are steeped in occult mysticism.
Skull and Bones. Accept or reject.
Of course, the most well-known is Yale's Skull and Bones. Its membership includes George W., his dad George Bush Sr., and his daddy Prescott, also John Kerry, conservative commentator William F. Buckley, a high number of Yale presidents, several high-ranking members of the CIA, and even actor Paul Giamatti. But this is just a small sample of their successful former members. And if you are a member, you're strictly forbidden from discussing your membership with anyone outside the organization.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America?
Both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
And perhaps for good reason. If the public knew the details of their rituals, they'd be appalled.
What you're hearing is the first recording ever made of the Skull and Bones initiation ceremony.
And what did you hear? What was it you know? You managed to get this unique
it was disgusting. It was gross. I mean, they were pretending to murder people. And
what was the tone of it, though? Was it jokey? Or was it quite...
No, it wasn't jokey at all. It was sick. It's about the only way I can describe it. It was sick.
Skull and Bones is the most well-known secret society, but they're just the tip of the iceberg. There are over 40 secret societies just in Yale alone, and hundreds more nationwide. Many looking like they belong in Harry Potter, and often steeped in dark and satanic symbolism. But with successful alumni able to donate millions of dollars to these schools, it's most likely that these secret societies enjoy undue influence on the choice of university presidents, board members, and student government positions. What these fraternal secret societies have in common with their big boy counterparts is an incessant importance placed on ritual. And it is the masters of these rituals who are some of the most revered figures among the intellectual and political elite. And the most notorious black magician in recent history is the early 20th century occult practitioner, Aleister Crowley, or as some like to call him, the Beast. This high-level Freemason is most famous for creating the religion of Thelema, a key component of which was the practice of ritual sex magic. Sex magic is the belief that during a sexual union, the moment of orgasm literally opens doorways into another dimension, where the barriers between the physical world and the astral dissolve. And it was Crowley's pioneering of such rituals that would land him friends and admirers in high places. People like Aldous Huxley, Timothy Leary, James Bond creator Ian Fleming, author Roald Dahl, and even Winston Churchill. He's even credited for creating the V for Victory sign to act as a magical foil for the Nazi swastika.
Repeat after me.
What's even more bizarre are the rumors that Crowley was indeed the biological father of former First Lady Barbara Bush. Although this is often scoffed at by the mainstream, a British documentary on Crowley entitled In Search of the Great Beast 666 points out how the historical details do line up to make this a possibility. Could the most wickedest man in the world be George W. Bush's grandfather? And would that even be surprising? Barbara herself was no stranger to the macabre, and she even kept a miscarried fetus in a jar for decades and showed it off to family members.
And my mom's what I learned was she's a straightforward person. She says to her teenage kid, here's a fetus.
Crowley would go on to inspire many prominent names of the 20th century. Pop culture icons like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and Michael Jackson were heavily inspired by Crowley's work. Devoted follower of Crowley and science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard would go on to parlay many of Crowley's teachings into the foundations of his Church of Scientology.
He was deeply involved with a British black magician called Aleister Crowley. Really the basis of Scientology, which is rather hidden and covered over, is the occult, the deep involvement with satanic powers, and through putting himself in deep hypnotic trances and the use of drugs on himself, he wanted to become the most powerful being in the world.
During his lifetime, Crowley's zest for ceremony, symbolism, and ritual were mainly known by a relatively small circle of like-minded practitioners. However, the culted powers of today, those who occupy high positions in politics, finance, and entertainment, have become ever more bold in touting these very ancient secrets in plain sight, even incorporating them in many areas of everyday life, oftentimes with the casual observer never catching on. Now, this isn't just fun and games for the privileged few for whom these cryptic messages are meant to be understood by. It's way more than that. The fervor in which many follow these rules and secret doctrines can be described quite accurately as religious fundamentalism. However, what I'm talking about is not a religion whose goal is to elevate man to become more enlightened and obtain spiritual harmony. The point of this religion is something else entirely. In 2015, a high-level insider in the Dutch financial industry blew the whistle on what he claimed to be dark occult practices in the highest levels of the financial world.
I was often put in the leading role because I kept a good overview of the situation. I played at the highest level for about 5 years. To put it carefully, most of these people followed a not very mainstream religion. These people, most of them, were Luciferians. And then you can say, religion is a fairy tale, God doesn't exist, none of that is real. Well, for these people, it is truth and reality. And they served something immaterial, what they called Lucifer.
Sir, it's him.
In this religion, which has been practiced in the shadows, has in the last few decades emerged in the public sphere in a series of cryptic symbols and themes flowing through the popular culture.
This always gives me the creeps, sir. He's the president of Hollywood. He's supposed to give you the creeps. Greetings, your tinseliness, imperious leader of Hollywood.
And there might not be any realm of mass-consumed culture that is more satanic than the pop music industry. Hank Harrison, the father of Whole front woman Courtney Love, has stated matter-of-factly that the heads of MTV were conducting satanic rituals and required the same of those who aspired to be featured on the channel.
Was Courtney, do you know of, ever involved in the occult or witchcraft or anything like that?
Absolutely, man. No kidding. Especially when she was with MTV. People at MTV were totally into satanic cults. The kind of stuff where they were having meetings and wearing red masks and sacrificing people and stuff.
Get the hell out of here, at MTV.
The musicians that were going through MTV couldn't get on MTV unless they were vetted by these people.
Really?
And they had definite proclivities to not let anybody in there unless they were able to manipulate them through these various cult practices.
But even the largest names in pop music are not shy about their dark occult leanings. Powerhouse Lady Gaga has been accused of doing occult rituals in her hotel room when the London Intercontinental Hotel accused the singer of leaving, quote, large amounts of blood in the bathtub, which housekeepers claimed she was bathing in.
If you don't get this right now, I swear to Lucifer, I'm gonna...
But sure, a few celebs are into the cult, no big deal, right? Well, what if nearly every famous face you know was indoctrinated into this dark world? In 2016, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles hosted a strictly black-tie gala for the who's who in Hollywood. While a quick peruse of the MoCA website describes nothing other than an innocent art event, images leaked online revealed something truly macabre. Prices ranging from about $25,000 to $100,000 gets you a table at this weird party, where human beings are seen as nothing but meat to be consumed. A high priestess is carried in as a dead body, arises, and carries out a mock sacrifice on this red velvet cake made to look like a nude woman, her flesh consumed by some of the biggest names in Hollywood. The belle of this ball is a performance artist named Marina Abramovic. Not only is she the darling of celebrities and satanic trendies everywhere, she's most well known on the internet for a practice called spirit cooking, a ritual that you can see her performing here that includes pig's blood, human menstrual blood, breast milk, and semen.
Here's her with Lady Gaga at a spirit dinner. As you can see, someone laying in what is breast milk, sperm, piss, urine, and then them eating it all together.
But okay, so what? What does any of this mean? What does it even mean to worship Satan these days anyway?
I went to places called Churches of Satan. They were doing their holy mass with naked woman and liquor and stuff, and it just amused me. I didn't make the connection yet. The Luciferians, the Satanists, whatever you wish to call it, it is a real entity. There really has been a moment of separation from the manifestation of light, in which a group went their own way and are carrying an intense hatred, anger. This is an all-annihilating force that hates our guts. It hates creation. It hates life. And it will do anything to destroy us completely. And the way to do that is to divide humanity. Divide and conquer is their truth.
Sounds pretty dramatic, huh? But if this was going on right under our noses, how could it be hidden from the public at large?
I think we are quite lost in many ways, and we live in a society that invests huge amounts of money and vast quantities of energy in ensuring that we all stay lost. A society that invests in creating unconsciousness so that we're just passive consumers and not really asking any of the questions.
You know the old expression, don't worry, be happy?
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy.
The main method which we are kept in our slumber is of course the mass media, which control of has been placed in increasingly fewer hands. Without the inconvenience of a population that receives its news from a diverse and independent body of outlets, it becomes very easy to shape and nudge us in any direction they want.
To change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
Our societal lobotomy and design political ineffectiveness have allowed these powers to grow ever more bold in their sadism, reaching a point where it becomes difficult to imagine, and very tempting to pretend that it isn't true. I have to warn you, this is where things get dark.
The Washington Times reported today that unidentified White House aides in the Carter, Reagan, and Bush administrations now are being investigated for using the services of a call boy ring. The paper reports that 2 of the male prostitutes were given a late-night tour of the White House last year.
You see, many of those connected to the gears of power are complete fucking deviants, committing acts so depraved that it seems almost impossible, oftentimes involving children. One such peek behind this dark curtain came in 1988 and is known as the Franklin Credit Union cover-up, when a Nebraska businessman got caught flying as many as 270 young boys from the Boys Town Orphanage in Nebraska to DC, where they were pimped out to religious leaders and Beltway insiders. We're talking about people so highly connected that some of the boys were given late-night tours of the White House. And despite mountains of damning victim testimonies, nobody went to jail, and a number of the accusers died in mysterious circumstances. You see, if you're a sick pervert, it helps that you're above the law.
Keeping them honest tonight, potentially hundreds of military employees and contractors who may have bought child pornography online but haven't been prosecuted or even in some cases investigated. 5,200 from an internet sting operation, including staffers for the Secretary of Defense and contractors at the NSA. After about 8 months, the entire probe was halted.
This is big. Take, for instance, the scandal involving DynCorp, a large private Defense Department contractor. When they got caught trafficking women and children through international prostitution rings, few in the media or law enforcement even batted an eye. Few had the courage, like former U.S. Representative Cynthia McKinney, to stand up and ask why no one was being brought to justice.
Mr. Secretary, is it policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls?
Thank you, Representative.
Basically, human trafficking is like a scourge that has overtaken the decision makers, the policy makers. I don't know if it's that this is a part of the requirement to join an elite political body, or if it's just something that happens as a result of being in power and then becoming, more craven with your power. We know what happened, we know what continues to happen, and yet there seems to be this air of impunity.
However, no one rocks impunity quite like the Brits.
The allegations beggar belief. Young boys driven around London and delivered to abuse parties. MPs, police officers and other pillars of the British establishment engaged in depraved acts of abuse with children. And now the latest shocking claim. At least 3 murders linked to a network of VIP perverts.
Okay, another edition of Top of the Pops.
And the most prolific serial rapist of all time was famed UK TV presenter and close friend of Prince Charles, Jimmy Savile, whose victims number in the hundreds.
The numbers are bewildering. 450 people have come forward. 328 were children at the time. 214 crimes have been reported, 34 rapes. The youngest victim was 8. And on it goes. Hundreds must have known something.
Here we go.
Savile was more than just a friend to the British royals. In fact, him and Prince Charles were such close friends that he would deliver personal messages between Charles and Diana as their marriage was failing. It's believed that Savile was brought into the royal inner circle by Lord Mountbatten, who himself had his own sex scandal involving the children's home in Belfast, known as the Concordia scandal. But there's seemingly no end to the stories involving high-level Brits and the sexual exploitation of children. And one of the most appalling descriptions of this ultra-wealthy UK sex abuse cult comes from 15-year-old survivor Teresa, who was pimped out by her own grandmother since she was a young child.
According to Teresa, the worst rituals took place at a house somewhere in the country.
It was big, expensive. From the front, it looked like a castle. It had a long drive and big double wooden doors.
Do you think they were rich people then?
Very rich.
And sex abuse wasn't the only terrible thing she had to endure.
And then a sacrifice would happen.
The sacrifice? Were these animal sacrifices?
Animals and people. There was a tramp who was brought in once, and he was killed. He was cut from his throat down to his stomach. I ate him, or bits of him.
When the former bassist for the band The Scorpions, Ralph Reicherman, was confronted by the TV show TMZ, he too described attending something similar.
The one time I've seen really bad.
Was it like a donkey show, or?
No, actually, I think they actually kill people there and stuff. They pay up to 100,000 people to see people get
executed.
I'm not kidding. But I went to another one where literally I saw the grossest. I wanted to throw up.
Our next guest participated in human sacrifice rituals and cannibalism. She says her family has been involved in rituals for generations. You don't have to give us the gory details, but what kinds of things went on in the family?
Well, there would be rituals in which babies would be sacrificed, and you would have to,
Whose babies?
There were people who bred babies in our family. There's other families across the country. It's not just my own family.
And the purpose of sacrifice is to what? Is to bring you what? What are you sacrificing for?
For power.
If we are talking about the worst things that I have experienced, at some point, I was invited, which is why I'm telling you all this, to participate in sacrifices abroad. That was the breaking point. Children.
During these ceremonies, was Satan, the devil, ever referred to?
He was called Lucifer.
What did they say about the devil, about Lucifer?
That killing the people made him happy.
It all seems so crazy and over the top. Could Teresa's claims be the product of some psychotic illness? Or an overly active imagination?
Do you believe Teresa's story?
I believe Teresa's story. It's exactly the same story as I've heard from men who says they've done it. How do those children able to describe rituals, to talk about ceremonies, to talk about sacrificing animals? How do those children know?
In fact, Teresa's experience isn't rare. Although this will never show up on the front page of any publicly traded media operation, there's a never-ending stream of victims who have come out and documented their experiences with wealthy satanic ritual abuse cults. And the fact that they're even able to recount their stories makes them the lucky ones.
If you Google this, you'll find enough worldwide witness accounts to know this isn't a Walt Disney fairy tale. Unfortunately, the truth is that worldwide they have been doing this for thousands of years.
The psychopathic taste for human fear, suffering, and lording the power of life and death over their helpless victims is just part of the reason why this goes on. But it also goes deeper. These black magic elite wholeheartedly believe that, if done in the correct ritual context, that certain kinds of sacrifices will literally summon what can only be described as, well, demons. Yeah, that's where we're going with this. And your personal feelings on whether demons actually exist are not what's important. My point is that the black magic elite unquestionably believe that much of their power comes from these entities, which they led into this world, through ritual and sacrifice. And they come from far outside the realm of what we consider known reality. You would think that this kind of superstitious thinking would have died out by the time we entered the modern era. However, those in high places are not at all shy about their contact with the world beyond. Ex-Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal has written about how his ex-girlfriend was taken over by a demonic force and had to be exorcised by a priest. Former South Korean President Park Geun-hye, who was ousted from power and jailed in 2016 on numerous accusations of corruption and belonging to a satanic cult, also admitted to channeling spirits and leaked emails, and believed that they had, quote, complete control over her body and soul. Given all this, it should be no surprise that the founder of Scientology and disciple of Aleister Crowley, L. Ron Hubbard, based the foundations of Scientology on contacting such spiritual entities.
He used to conjure up these demons and thereby plug into them or have them plug into him, and a lot of his early writing was, which could be called spirit writing.
So, what the fuck is a demon? Perhaps Carl Sagan can explain.
Let's imagine that we are perfectly flat. I mean absolutely flat. We know, us flatlanders, about left-right, and we know about forward-back, but we have never heard of up-down. Let us imagine that into flatland, hovering above it, comes a strange three-dimensional creature which, oddly enough, looks like an apple. "Hello," says the three-dimensional creature. "How are you? I am a visitor from the third dimension." Well, the poor square looks around his closed house, sees no one there, and what's more, has witnessed a greeting coming from his insides, a voice from within.
In fact, there have been many well-documented cases of what can best be described as textbook demonic possession. While this is the stuff of fantasy for most of us, the Catholic Church takes it very seriously, and in some cases exorcisms were performed by a trained priest, even though the subject remains largely taboo. But what if the highest official in the Catholic faith was caught performing one? It seems that in the documented cases of exorcism, not all of the demonic spirits appear to be deceased humans. Instead, they seem to come from somewhere else, altogether, and most of the time with not very nice intentions. But those who have been spiritually initiated surely wouldn't worship at the altar of these entities if they weren't getting something in return. Perhaps a demonic possession could give you near superhuman powers, along with the stamina, charisma, and talent needed to become a modern-day idol.
Sasha is my alter ego. Kind of the first time I felt something else come into me, and you know, she can do things that I cannot do when I'm in rehearsal. I mean, I can try, but then it just doesn't happen. I guess I wouldn't be very entertaining on the stage, so Sasha comes out, and she's fearless.
However, an even more likely entertainer who receives interdimensional help would be Lady Gaga. Why? Maybe it's because she needs someone to watch over her at night to protect her from demons.
Gaga's been having a recurring nightmare about the devil. Now, Gaga explained the dream is about a phantom taking her into a room where there's a blonde girl with ropes tied to her limbs, pulling her apart. How creepy is that? Well, we certainly hope it's getting better.
The dream was so terrifying, I thought somehow a devil force was trying to take hold of me, a darkness. I guess I see devil and darkness as the same thing.
Nicki Minaj, too, has an unwelcome visitor by the name of Roman.
Roman is a crazy boy who lives in me, and he says the things that I don't want to say. I think he was born out of rage. He was conceived in rage.
That must be nice to have like an ignorant loudmouth who you can just sort of blame every...
He wants to be blamed. I don't want to blame him. I ask him to leave, but he can't. He's here for a reason. People have brought him out. People conjured him up. Now he won't leave.
Now, let's say for the sake of argument that what we're witnessing here is not just a massive form of mental illness, and that creatures from somewhere unseen are using these people as a vessel. Then what the fuck are these things? Did they evolve on this planet? Well, what if they came from somewhere else entirely? The universe is vast and almost certainly harbors a wide variety of life forms. Despite this, every official agency tasked with exploring outside our atmosphere's official position is that no such life has been discovered, not even on a microbial level. Yet to a large subculture, the question of whether or not we're alone in the universe has been answered. These enthusiasts cite a rich history of human alien contact spanning from the beginning of civilization. And even if you think they're crazy, they cite a few examples from the modern era that are quite head-scratching, such as the Battle of Los Angeles. In 1942, 5 years before Roswell, the west coast of the United States was on high war alert just months after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Major cities were defended by batteries of anti-aircraft artillery. And on one quiet February evening, an unknown object was spotted over the airspace of Los Angeles. A citywide blackout was ordered, and searchlights and anti-aircraft shells lit up the sky.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane.
The guns didn't stop until 4 a.m., and despite tracking the object over 25 miles and expending over 1,400 rounds of ammunition, the official military explanation was that there was nothing in the sky, and that the entire incident was just, quote, war jitters. Another widely witnessed sighting occurred a decade later in 1952, when what appeared to be an entire fleet of unidentified objects flew right over Washington, D.C. This was witnessed by thousands, picked up by radar, and was the subject of many sensational front-page headlines. But officially, it was just an atmospheric disturbance. But perhaps the most credible UFO phenomena happened in 1989 over Belgium,
Bright white light was
when over 1,500 witnesses, including police officers, spotted a large black triangle hovering silently over the town of Eupen. Despite the many witnesses, this is the only known image of the craft that was captured that day. However, these days, sightings like these get lost in the news cycle constantly.
A UFO in China's skies forced Zhoushan Airport to stop operations on July 7th. Outbound flights were grounded after the unidentified flying object was detected by a flight crew.
People describe seeing an unexplained circular light seen hovering high over Moscow on Wednesday evening.
This video posted to a South San Jose Nextdoor page shows a small light travel across the sky for about a minute. Then a flash and boom, and it disappears.
Oh yeah, that doesn't do it justice at all.
This guy can even summon them on demand.
Everyone's gonna think you're absolutely nuts.
Well, I thought I was absolutely nuts.
Until the prophet started praying for a sighting. I wasn't exactly convinced.
I pray, oh Yahweh, that you send a sighting so that they know that I am not mentally ill. I am not a false prophet, like those who seek to kill me say I am.
I see something straight up.
Oh, brother, look at it, there it is.
Now, if Yahweh is incredible enough for you, what if nations and militaries from around the world decided to release their own recordings of UFOs? What you're looking at is footage officially released by the Chilean Navy in 2017 of an unknown craft spraying an unknown gas into the skies above Chile. The Navy went public with the footage in hopes that it would help identify what this object was. Likewise, a military helicopter in Puerto Rico captured this small object, quickly darting across the countryside. Now, if we're willing to accept that various militaries, governments, and mainstream media organizations have outright admitted that there's something very odd going on in the skies, then maybe we shouldn't be so quick to dismiss the thousands of amateur UFO videos that litter the web as hoaxes. I mean, these go back to the 80s and 90s, when it would have been extremely difficult to convincingly fake. Today, everyone basically has a high-definition camera on them at all times. You would expect that people would be constantly capturing weird things, and they are.
We saw that.
Right there, down the left. Right there.
You're
Boom,
right.
it's gone.
And a clever way that some UFO hunters spot these objects are moon transits. Even with a moderately powered consumer telescope, it's possible to record the silhouette of objects in orbit as they cross in front of the moon in the night sky. However, this method seems to catch some stuff that defies any common sense explanation. Space debris, you say? I don't think space debris has thrusters, or can make turns. But what about the people who we know have actually been to space? What do they have to say on the subject? Mercury astronaut Gordon Cooper, who broke a record for the number of orbits around Earth, had encountered UFOs even before joining the space program, while flying over Central Europe with his fighter squadron.
There were a number of extraterrestrial vehicles out there cruising around, flying the same kind of formation we fly in our fighters. They didn't have wings, they were saucer-shaped, and we never could get as high or as fast as they were. This universe is limitless, and we're kind of vain to think that we're the only ones that exist here.
Even the second man on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, says that he saw something during the Apollo 11 mission.
We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically, it becomes an unidentified flying object.
Crazy old Buzz even had this odd statement, which he gave on live TV.
We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there.
But if advanced intelligence exists in our solar system, then the question begs to be asked, what do they look like? What you're looking at was absolutely a real living organism, and not a fake, or a construction from other animal parts. This tiny mummy is 6 inches long, and was discovered by locals in the Atacama Desert of Chile. It was brought to Stanford University for testing, to determine exactly what it is.
On a clinical standpoint, it's a human mutation, because just a preliminary examination of this sample is that it is obviously older than just an aborted fetus.
In fact, dental analysis suggests that whatever this thing was, it lived to be about 8 years old.
In the most interesting and outrageous case, it is something that is not human and not primate, but still hominid.
So it's a 6-inch tall, 8-year-old child. Does that make any sense? And it's not the only similar thing to have been found. This specimen was found in 2015 by the Govashchi River in western Russia, and it has many similar features as the creature found in the Atacama Desert. Also in Russia is this guy, known as the Kishtim bean, which went missing soon after initial testing determined that it was a biological entity and not a hoax. These are all well-documented cases, yet it's still widely thought that believing in, or generally being interested in the topic of aliens is crazy. And even if it's all true, what does it have to do with most people's daily lives? Why does it even matter?
The phenomenon itself opens up vistas, profound vistas of thought when you think of the history of this. It's an entirely different take on our history. When you think about the science, how is this stuff even possible? And by studying the science, you really are getting into the true cutting-edge scientific questions of our day.
And perhaps that's exactly why this information is being kept just enough out of public discourse that it never really needs to be acknowledged. Actually, this information is aggressively suppressed, in many cases, by the very federal agency entrusted with finding the answers to these questions. Most famously is the never-dying controversy that NASA faked the Apollo missions that put men on the moon. This theory has been so contentious that it's even caused fistfights between former Apollo astronauts and conspiracy theorists who adamantly believe that the moon landings are a hoax. And while there's some generally stunning footage and images captured by Apollo, there are a few head-scratchers. You have astronauts who look like they're being pulled up by wires, space buggies with no tracks, and also this embarrassing incident that happened when some pieces of genuine moon rocks handed to over 100 countries after the Apollo missions turned out to be nothing more than petrified wood. And it gets worse. In the lead up to the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, NASA was forced to admit that pretty much the entirety of its telemetry data was lost when the tapes they were stored on were erased and used for other NASA projects.
This isn't just one tape. This is reams of tape labeled Apollo 11 moon landing. Someone had to physically go and erase it.
But it doesn't stop with the moon. Some conspiracy theorists even think that images from Mars rovers might also be fake. This is NASA's Mars rover testing grounds on Devon Island in northern Canada. The resemblance is undeniable, especially when NASA's been caught time and again artificially covering images captured by Martian rovers who look inhospitably red from a more Earth-like blue. However, one truly outlandish claim that conspiracy theorists make is that even the interior of the International Space Station is fake. Although anyone with a consumer-grade telescope can see the space station for themselves, the astronauts on the inside are getting caught on what looks like wires. Leave your explanation in the comments below if you think this is something else. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I think I've provided a smorgasbord buffet of evidence that there's something going on here that we're not being told. And trying to uncover these secrets has led to many more unanswered questions. But to go any further with this story, good solid proof of what is truth and fiction becomes hard to find. And where hard evidence is scarce, answers mostly come in the form of first-hand testimony from an often colorful group of people who claim to have personally experienced something out of this world. And there's obvious problems with this. For starters, with little to no physical evidence, it's hard to know whether those who have come forward with amazing tales are either intentionally lying or suffering from some form of high-functioning mental illness. However, it becomes very obvious that most of these whistleblowers, whether you think they're lying or not, are each telling a very small part of the same and very specific story. And if you barely believed anything I've showed you up to this point, you might want to get off now, because we're about to turn the batshit crazy meter up to 11, as we take a deep dive into the most insane shared worldview you'll ever hear. For the sake of brevity, I just want to focus on the overlapping accounts of a sample of 6 specific individuals. 6 whistleblowers who will serve as our guides to the bottom of an extremely freaky rabbit hole. And if it makes you stomach what's to come any easier, nothing you're about to hear is at all true. And with that said, let's bring on the crazy. First, a brief introduction. First up is William Tompkins, a real person with a detailed paper trail proving he is who he says he is. As a very bright child growing up in Southern California just before the Second World War, Tompkins attracted the attention of the US Navy for creating models of Navy ships from memory that were so detailed that they included a number of then classified features that the Navy didn't want known to the public. Tompkins was able to use his model building abilities to land a job with one of the US's largest aerospace corporations. And that's when things began to get weird.
I'm in there for only 4 weeks, and they put me into a secret lab.
This think tank was tasked with designing hundreds of theoretical military missions that would take place in space, as well as having to design a fleet of spacecraft necessary to carry them out.
The vehicles that we designed for all of these missions are massive. They're like 40 times the size of the little Apollo.
Where Tompkins attracts a lot of controversy is his claim that these military missions and spacecraft did become a reality in a classified space program ran by the Navy called Solar Warden.
It is 8 Navy space battle groups with destroyers, cruisers, all kinds of stuff.
According to Tompkins, he was able to get away with such disclosures with direct approval of the Navy admiral he worked under, who Tompkins believes belongs to a faction of the military elite who wants some of this information disclosed to the public. William Tompkins passed away in 2017 at the age of 94. Our next whistleblower, like William Tompkins, has many verifiable records backing up his identity. His name is Philip Schneider. Schneider was the son of a distinguished U.S. Naval Intelligence Captain, Otto Oscar Schneider, who was instrumental in the design of nuclear submarines and helped the military test nuclear weapons in the South Pacific during the 40s. Phil was also a very bright child, who eventually became a geological scientist and structural engineer, and according to his claims, worked in the construction of very large underground military facilities. However, it's his claim that he worked on one particular underground base that would make him famous.
I was involved in something very controversial in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. We built an underground facility, a better part of 3 cubic miles hollowed out underground.
Phil claims that in 1979, while excavating the base under Dulce, he was lowered into a cavern to check on some malfunctioning equipment, when he then stumbled upon a large active alien base within the Earth.
The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. The entity was absolutely horrible. I didn't waste any time. I reached for my pistol. Well, that's when all the hell broke loose, really. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish.
Schneider says he was saved by a Green Beret who ended up dying in the conflict. Whether you believe Phil or not, it does seem that he sustained permanent physical and psychological injuries. Here you can hear Cynthia Dreyer, the woman that he would marry years later, describe the damage Phil had suffered.
He did Dulce, New Mexico, where he was shot in the chest, and he had his leg bandaged from top to bottom. His memory is like totally lost as to what he did before. It wasn't until after we got married and stopped taking the medications he was taking when I first met him that he started to remember all of the things.
I'm breaking the law. I'm breaking world as well as federal law, coming out and even talking about this to a group of people. I love my country more than I love my life.
So, how was Phil able to get away with revealing such stunning top-secret information? Well, in 1996, Philip Schneider was found dead in his apartment with a rubber hose tied around his neck. His death was ruled a suicide by local authorities. If our next whistleblower's name sounds familiar, that's because she's the great-granddaughter of the 34th US President, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, I'm guessing his great-granddaughter Laura was kind of the black sheep of the Eisenhower family, especially after she went public to claim that there's an attempt by a secret shadowy group to recruit her to live on Mars?
In 2006, I was recruited to go off planet, and there was a lot of manipulation connected to it, so it wasn't, like a nice invitation done with respect. It had a lot to do with, control.
That control came in the form of a man she was romantically and emotionally involved with, whom she believes was sent to recruit her.
I would research and
the names of the people that he was directly interfacing with. They had these cover careers and they were well respected in their field. After I told him I was not going to go, and he basically put it in the words of, you know, they're going to kidnap you. But he tried to kind of soften it so I wouldn't get all panicked.
Now, why would anyone want to go to Mars? Well, according to her, breakaway factions of the US military-industrial complex are actually way more advanced in space travel than what is made public, and that we've actually had a colony on Mars for decades.
What are we talking about here? You're saying that there's actually a human colony that's been on Mars that's
People
existing now, not in the future, now.
Yeah, existing now.
Laura is also convinced that much of the technology that secretly got us to Mars was in part because her great-grandfather made treaties with an alien race known as the Greys. She also believes the handling of this extraterrestrial information was taken out of her great-grandfather's hands and placed in the control of uber-governmental organizations, some with not very positive intentions.
Eisenhower didn't trust them and so set up a unit in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he also warned us in his final speech.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex.
We need to understand what this agenda is about because it's connected to, you know, ET government treaties and some of the things that were discussed in the 1950s, actually. So it goes on and on. If people really want to find out more, you need to Google people like Captain K. His real name is Randy Kramer.
Which brings us to our next whistleblower, Randy Kramer. Randy claims that he's a super soldier, a Marine to be exact, from the very same Marine Corps Special Sections unit that Laura Eisenhower says was set up by her great-grandfather. And he was then subjected to rather unusual forms of training and unusual missions.
The project was called Project Moonshot. It was trying to not use trauma-based mind control. It was an attempt to create augmented soldiers without having to break them 100 times to make us more durable, because breaking soldiers again and again using trauma-based mind control makes them fragile.
So why should we believe him?
Impersonating an officer is a felony. Lying about duty stations or defrauding the public is a felony. And certainly the Marine Corps would give a crap, and I've been doing this for almost 3 years, and I haven't heard a word from them. If I were misrepresenting myself or lying, I would be committing a number of felonies.
That's an interesting point to keep in mind. That's because Randy claims that he spent 17 years of active duty defending the colony on Mars as part of an elite outfit. So why would such a colony need military protection? Well, according to Randy, Mars is home to two main intelligent species. A group called the mentiras that he describes as being similar to ants and operated on a hive mind, and a group of intelligent reptoids.
My understanding is the indigenous insectoids arrived there some hundreds of thousands of years ago, so they've been there for a really, really long time, but they're not evolved from there. But the reptoids are an evolved species that evolved from lesser rock lizards.
Kramer goes on to describe how the two species were once in bitter conflict over domination of the planet, which used to be full of life and very similar to Earth. That is until a large nuclear-type weapon destroyed the planet, blowing its atmosphere and most of its water into space, and leaving its survivors in a near-primitive state. And despite such destruction, he says the planet is teeming with biological life.
The equatorial region, which I've only been to a couple of times, has some bigger animals. But where we were, which was much farther north, everything was very small. So little birds, little lizards, little, burrowing rodents, mammals. But as soon as you get underground, things can get a little bigger.
Sounds crazy, right? His story is outrageous. But there is a trickle of evidence coming from official space agencies that seem to back up some of Randy's claims. Aside from what looks like toppled ruins, space agencies have published photos of structures that very much resemble walls and crashed craft. If these images are genuine, which official agencies don't dispute that they are, then there appears to be a lot going on our closest neighbor that's very intriguing indeed. Now, if Randy Kramer was a secret super soldier who avoided the trauma-based mind control as part of his training, then our next whistleblower was one of those so-called super soldiers who wasn't so lucky. His name is Max Spears. Max claims to have been involved since birth in a subprogram of the Montauk Project. The program, named Project Oak Tree, was tasked to create programmable mind control super soldiers by artificially inducing split personality disorder.
When the mind is fractured through trauma, whether it is sexual trauma, whether it is physical trauma, violence, the mind fractures itself and creates an amnesiac barrier around that so that you don't have to keep reliving the experience over and over again. If you're taught, you're then able to go inside there and then program a new person to do anything, to do absolutely anything.
This technique, according to Max, has been around since the Egyptians, but was scientifically perfected by the Nazis before the end of World War II, as well as after when their scientists were involved in US military projects. But since its roots are much older, Max says the recruits are often chosen based on their bloodline.
My family goes back, and for the last certainly 100 years, we're all involved in the occult. On my father's side, he's a descendant from Charlemagne. For these specific bloodlines and these breeding bloodlines, they have to take a child before the age of 3.
And so Max was fucked with royally. But his programming began to break down in his early 30s. Max also says that this type of mind control is common, and that there are many public examples of this programming breaking down over time.
I feel a little shaky. Oh no, no, wrong with me. No, it's good. It's good. You go ahead. You get the question.
Lectures of Max's story are widely available online and are very interesting, not only because of his personal story, but also because some of the strange things he says on a whole slew of topics, such as Colonel Sanders.
The man who was behind KFC, he was also a master programmer, handler, slave handler.
And why you shouldn't eat pork.
The domesticated pig is disturbingly a cross between a human and a wild boar, and consuming it is basically cannibalism in a way.
If you're willing to believe Max, his information is quite explosive, but if he was telling the truth, how was he able to get away with disseminating it to millions? Just before he was scheduled to give a lecture in Poland, Max, at the age of 39, died suddenly in his Warsaw apartment. Max's mother believes that foul play was involved, although authorities refused to investigate any further.
The roads lead all over the place to places that I never ever thought that I would go to, and it's a very mysterious and frightening world that I've stepped into.
Our final whistleblower's name is Alex Collier, and ever since he was a child, he claims to have been in psychic and physical contact with a race of highly evolved and benevolent extraterrestrials, known as the Andromedans.
As far as the Andromedan culture, their society would be approximately 4,700 years more advanced than ours on a spiritual level. On a technological level, they're 50,000 years.
Alex says the Andromedans contacted him because they were not happy with the evolutionary direction that humans were heading. And he wasn't the only one.
There are also other people who are mediums or channels who are also getting information on a spiritual level.
And so Alex was chosen to help elevate humanity's collective consciousness, which is under threat of multiple parasitic races of alien entities that are attempting to dominate us from the shadows. Maybe that's why he's so intense.
You are not coming into my head, you are not taking me over, and you are not going to violate my free will. I don't give a damn who you are. Leave me alone.
Now, it's not these whistleblowers' individual stories that we're going to focus on. Rather, it's how their claimed experiences and personal beliefs fit ever so snugly into a much larger story. Quite possibly the most insane story you'll ever hear. Their combined accounts spin a tale so wild that even if you refuse to believe it, you probably won't forget it. And we're going to start with one of the least controversial assumptions made by these whistleblowers, that the US, and the world as a whole, is littered with large secret underground installations.
Right now, there are 131 active deep underground military bases in the United States.
Underground bases? Underground bases, sure, yes. But underground world, an entire world.
While Phil's job was to build these bases, William Tompkins claims to have visited secret naval facilities under China Lake, California. Max Spears believes some of his mind control programming took place in underground laboratories. But in general, these bases are used for all sorts of things, from advanced research, human trafficking, and even doomsday shelters for a chosen few. Some of these whistleblowers are even aware of the notorious Dulce base, where Phil Schneider had his unlucky encounter.
That's just an entrance point in and out.
This is Area 51.
This is in New Mexico, Dulce.
And they believe that the completed base is the site of gruesome experiments done with animals, humans, and aliens.
Well, you got under Dulce, you've got the 7 levels under Dulce, where Nightmare Hall, which I think is the 6th level, where they've just put everything you could possibly imagine together, testing out things.
Which brings us to another commonality that these whistleblowers share. A strong conviction that the US and other governments have been working with alien technology, and even with the aliens themselves, for almost a century.
The military's known about the alien question for the better part of 70 years. Of course, remember the Germans did too, the Nazi Germans.
During World War II, Germany was taking extraterrestrial information and putting in production 12, 14 different extraterrestrial type vehicles. 90% of that was taken out of Germany before the war even stopped.
And for this reason, the Allied defeat over Nazism at the end of World War II is actually a huge point of contention for our whistleblowers.
Essentially, World War II had ended. We didn't win. It's just sort of ended.
We didn't win the Second World War as it says in the textbooks. What actually happened is that they went underground and then made it appear that they had lost.
You know, this facade of, winning the war, begins to just take us further and further away from the extraterrestrial concept and what that really means and what it was, what is it really about.
And while the battered German nation surrendered at the end of the war, the Nazi Party never surrendered, and many of their top scientists, military, and intelligence operatives were incorporated, along with their Nazi ideology, deep into the military-industrial complex under Operation Paperclip. This secret Nazi-infiltrated, highly funded national security apparatus came in place just in time, because the late 1940s were not just known for one strange UFO incident, but several. And according to Tompkins, this recovered material was being reverse engineered by the very military and aerospace companies he had worked for. But it wasn't just reverse engineering. Our whistleblowers claim that highly advanced information was given to humanity directly by the aliens.
Eisenhower signed a pact with the known alien species of the time, there were 3 at the time, said that we're going to deal in high technology, but you can take a few head of cattle and a few human beings and you can experiment on them.
We'll give you this technology and you'll have power. And the greed was taking over.
Technology that can take them to the moon, the technology that can take them to Mars, that'll give them the technology to do time travel. They totally sold out a race, our history, everything, for their brief moment in the sun.
And while the public saw rockets and aircraft push the limits of combustion engines, a black world was working on exotic technologies based on electromagnetism, while also keeping much of the world in the dark about what had been achieved. William Tompkins and Mars Marine Randy Kramer claims that this was done primarily through a Navy program called Solar Warden.
Essentially, in the same way that you have an Atlantic fleet and a Pacific fleet, you have the solar system and an imaginary line that divides down the middle, then divides into 2 fleets, which are Solar Warden and Radiant Guardian.
Randy Kramer even thinks that the 2018 creation of the Space Force is just a veiled way to leak some of this technology to the public.
Quote-unquote creation of a Space Force is a fake frontage to a real organization behind it. They can now roll stuff out like it's brand new or we've just been working on it when it's stuff that we've had for a long time.
Now, another strange claim our whistleblowers make is that our moon holds many secrets.
We had launched surveying missions so we could be looking at where we were going to land, and we had seen facilities, ancient facilities on the moon. So we knew there were facilities on the backside. We knew a whole lot that people didn't talk about.
The DMZ on the dark side of the moon has a lot of bases that belong to a lot of different ET species.
It sounds absurd, right? Yet certain objects found in photos from NASA and other space agencies of strange objects that stand out from the lunar surface definitely don't look natural. However, alien bases sound completely tame when compared to this next moon revelation.
What is the moon?
What is the moon? What is the moon? It's not a natural object. Mm-hmm. It's an unnatural object.
Our moon's artificial, completely artificial. It was brought here from Ursa Minor, apparently between 11 and 12,000 years ago.
For the purpose of?
Of being a satellite in a base.
This moon is not a moon. It's not your moon in the first place.
It is older than the Earth. There are ruins all over it. There are bases underneath it. It's everything that we're told it isn't.
And just like out of science fiction comics from the 1950s, our whistleblowers seem fairly confident that Mars colonists from the shadow government have been battling it out with other alien races for decades.
Mars Attacks?
Mars Attacks.
Yeah, well there's a lot of truth in that movie.
They use
Trillions of our tax dollars are building these colonies and investing in this corporate conglomerate of, extraterrestrial advanced ET technologies.
We had a human colony there of 300,000, so I'm told. One was underground, one was above ground, Adam and Eve. They're conquered, they're being taken over. The human beings that are from Earth, that volunteered or were kidnapped to go there, are in deep trouble. Many of them have already been eaten, some of them have already been killed. There is nothing we can do here as a race to help them.
Now, if we begin to train all our telescopes on that, are we going to be able to see activity going on there?
I suppose that we would. I have a feeling that they already are seeing incredible amounts of activity, but they're not allowed to say it.
However, if this story sounds completely impossible, part of the reason might be because you learned in school that even if an alien craft moved at nearly impossible speeds, it would still take hundreds, thousands, if not millions of years to get anywhere. So not worth it for our alien neighbors to visit. However, according to our whistleblowers, there's much more to surfing the cosmos than meets the eye.
Can the amplified voice of Ella Fitzgerald shatter this glass? Believe it.
What's interesting about these whistleblowers, and about many in the woo-woo community in general, is an extreme importance placed on vibration.
Everything around you is vibrating energy. Everything around you is vibrating energy. This is not solid. Nothing is solid. It is manifested through geometry, light, sound.
Everything's always vibrating, right? I'm sure it's something that we've all heard one time or another, but how many of us take a moment to think about what that really means? We know we can break down our reality into its most basic forms, like the atom. However, the atom is given its form by energy. Even Einstein once said that all matter is energy, whose vibration has been lowered as to be perceptible by the senses. And it is frequency that holds the informational blueprints to our universe. The structural information present in frequency can create amazing effects in our physical world. You can see here, audio frequency, when aimed at normal sand, can form structures that behave like atoms, or even galaxies. Its effects on water are just another example. Sound, by itself, can even create complex pictures. And if we compare this to the way energy creates everything around us, then we can truly begin to understand how our multidimensional reality really works.
The only experience that is directly available to you is your sensory data. And this sensory data is merely a stream of electrical impulses that stimulates your computing center.
In other words, all that I really know about the outside world is relayed to me through my electrical connections.
Exactly.
Why, that would mean that I really don't know what the outside universe is like at all, for certain.
That's it.
Most of us think of dimensions in terms of height, width, depth, and time being the fourth dimension. However, that's not what I'm talking about. Instead, think of all matters existing within a certain band of frequency, like musical harmonics and octaves. Everything that we could see, touch, or otherwise sense is basically existing in the same limited band of frequency that we're able to perceive. And like musical octaves, these frequency layers can go higher and lower forever. And while our consciousness exists in this dimension, humans too are said to have an unconscious presence in these lower and higher layers of reality, which are often referred to as fourth, fifth, and sixth densities.
Also in fourth density, we all become clairvoyants. We'll be able to see energy fields, see life forms, which means that if you're hiding something, it'll be seen instantaneously.
William Tompkins even believes that various advanced beings have been using this psychic mechanism to communicate with humans.
Probably thousands of people telepathically got information, okay?
Okay.
The bells were rung in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
The abilities that they have are latent in everybody. They just haven't lived in a society that has been screwed with like we have been here.
We have dormant and advanced DNA that many don't want us to be in touch with. They have created a control system that we are now in to ensure that we stay limited to a 3D existence.
Interesting theory, huh? But there's no scientific proof that such abilities exist. Or is there? Dr. Rupert Sheldrake out of the UK has spent the better part of his career scientifically proving the existence of what he calls morphic resonance, a metaphysical transmission of information between living creatures that transcends the physical limitations of space and time. Most of Sheldrake's work is often ignored and criticized by the mainstream. However, Sheldrake has provided study after study proving the existence of some form of telepathy in animals and humans. One such experiment had to do with whether or not dogs could sense when their owners would return home. The results are difficult to explain, absent some form of telepathy. However, many experiments with positive results, such as this one, go ignored.
Well, Rupert Sheldrake is a highly credentialed scientist. These ideas were scientific enough, but they were the kind of science that these people don't like. If you were to suggest, as I do, that in altered states of consciousness we may access valuable and useful information, which may be of fundamental importance to humanity, that's a step too far.
And according to Max, the notion of psychic power is just another fact of reality for elite bloodline families at the top of the pyramid. In fact, he believes that this power is how they've been able to retain control of the world for centuries.
They interbreed because they want to make sure that they maintain this particular DNA within their family line, because this particular DNA gives them exalted abilities, gifts, psychic gifts. They have kept the secrets and the cheats for themselves, and they have left the slaves with no understanding of what's going on.
If we are indeed multidimensional life forms, with our souls as the part of us outside the physical body, then what happens when those bodies die? You see, one of the things that these whistleblowers agree on that's rather interesting is that out of all the beliefs about the afterlife that exist, they are all staunch believers in reincarnation.
A lot of people don't believe that they have many lives, okay? Some have more than others. We've got a whole lot of other stuff we got to do, okay?
Typically, reincarnation is associated with the Hindu religion, but in reality, the three major monotheistic religions where reincarnation is not believed in are the historical minority. The Norse and Druid religions believed in reincarnation, as well as the Sumerians, the Aztecs, the Mayans, Incas, ancient Greeks, and various practitioners of voodoo in West Africa are just some who believed we lived again and again. And the fact that many of us can't remember any of these past lives has halted our development as a species, whereas remembering past lives is common for more advanced life forms, like Alex Collier's Andromedans.
They know what their reincarnational past has been, so they see improvement in themselves life after life after life. We, if we hadn't been so screwed with here, would have the same abilities. But we've been manipulated incredibly on an intense level every day.
And perhaps this ability is still partly present in those who have yet to been exposed to years and years of physical and psychological manipulation. In fact, certain young children are able to recall vivid details of their past lives, a phenomenon with many documented cases. Perhaps none more stunning than the case of James Lanninger, a young man from Louisiana who had a fascination with airplanes since the time he could walk. He was especially interested in aircraft from World War II.
I said, "Oh look, there's a bomb on the bottom." He said, "That's not a bomb, that's a drop tank."
However, young James was plagued by reoccurring nightmares that caused his parents to worry.
He would wake up in the middle of the night, he'd be laying on his back, kicking his feet up at the ceiling. He would just be crying. He'd say, "Airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out."
Unable to clearly describe his dreams, James would draw them out, and the scenes always looked like World War II naval and air battles.
Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs.
I'd always asked him, "Do you remember what your name was?" And he always said James. But his name is James. "Do you remember the name of your boat?" He said Natoma.
Some research turned up the USS Natoma Bay, which fought in Iwo Jima. After contacting some of the surviving members of the Natoma crew, they came across this man, James Houston, a pilot who died during the fighting.
A rather large shell just hit him in the engine, and it burst into flames and went down.
James's parents even took him to a reunion of pilots who served on the Natoma, some of whom James was able to recognize by name.
"You're Bob Greenwald." I'm serious.
He'd never met Bob Greenwald.
No, he'd never met him before.
He even met Houston's sister, Anne.
And he goes, "It's not Anne, it's Annie. She wasn't my oldest sister. I had an older sister than that." And I said, "You did? Who was that?" And he goes, "Ruth. I mean Ruth."
Annie is what they called me when I was little, knowing my name and my sister's name, things that my brother did when he was a kid. It's too amazing to describe how he would feel that way, but he does. He considers me his sister.
Anne was so touched, she even gave James items from her brother's final effects.
The real bottom line here is we're all spirit. We contain a soul. That soul is a part of all that is. And that soul has been really trying to be recognized in each of us. And it hasn't been because the real truths of our essence, of our existence, of who we are, having been blinded from us and us being convinced that we're something that we're not, that we're physical, that we're animal form, and we're not. We're spirit. Our spirit animates these physical forms, period.
If we are indeed higher dimensional beings with the ability to exist in this astral realm, then it stands to reason that we're not alone.
The astral realm, which is the 4D, is pretty much taken over.
This was the craziest trip I have ever had in my life.
And nature might provide a way for essentially anyone to come in contact with these entities through the chemical DMT. DMT is produced in the brain by the pineal gland, and it is believed that our brains are flooded with this chemical in the moments before death. The bright light that many report during near-death experiences is widely believed by scientists to be an effect of this compound. DMT is also available as a highly illegal recreational drug, and while science states that its effects are hallucinations of the brain, there's an endless stream of personal testimonials that suggest that what they're experiencing is a shared universe, and filled with entities who are normally filtered out of conscious awareness.
They appear, it's not like they just pop out of nowhere.
There was like 5 of them looking at me.
They had some weird faces. I can't even fucking describe their face.
The thing from The Nightmare Before Christmas with like, and then it like stops me.
And waving his finger at me when I tried to look around.
It talks to you. I know it sounds crazy.
Well, the apple might be a little annoyed at this conclusion. It makes a contact with the square from below and sends our flat creature fluttering and spinning.
Ooh, it's scary. These dancing entities are kind of just dancing around.
Like the little dragon head things, and they doing like this, and then they'll see that I can see them and they'll go.
At first, the square has no idea what's happening. He's terribly confused. This is utterly outside his experience.
I'm like, what the fuck is these motherfuckers doing?
He comes to realize that he is seeing inside closed rooms in Flatland.
It was like you could see everything and everywhere.
It's like all machine, like the weird.
It was like melting. I was like going in the world.
He is looking inside his fellow flat creatures.
I can see his neurons. I can see all those energy circles around his eyes.
He is seeing Flatland from a perspective no one has ever seen it before.
Whoa!
Insane, insane, it's insane.
You people have been told total incorrect information from medical, from science, from history, from astronomy, from mathematics, you name it. Everything is incorrect.
I really appreciate you. Yes.
This is a lie.
Oh yeah, there's one more little thing that these whistleblower stories also have in common.
Reptilians.
So reptilians.
The reptilian.
The reptilians.
The reptilians.
Reptiles.
They're ugly looking lizard, alligator type people.
Come on, we couldn't leave this one out. Reptilians is regarded right up there with flat Earth when it comes to the bottom of the crackpot conspiracy barrel. A notion that didn't even exist until complete morons were able to learn how to use the internet. However, this one's actually been around a lot longer, and it's almost always tied with a theory known as the Hollow Earth. And while some have taken this literally, a more common and realistic interpretation is that Earth's crust is composed of large open areas, able to support civilizations that can adapt to a life underground.
There are caverns all over this planet which different extraterrestrial civilizations have been using.
There's oceans and forestry and all sorts in the pockets in the inner Earth.
And while proponents of this theory like to point out the abundance of reptile-related imagery found among ancient artworks as evidence for human contact with these beings, skeptics would be quick to point out that man, throughout history, has depicted all sorts of animals in artworks and mythology, like birds, fish, and lions, and in many cases given them human-like characteristics. However, reptiles are far and away the most represented. Nothing else even comes close. Officially, serpent worship goes back 70,000 years with tribes in Botswana. Snakes were also worshipped by the Olmecs in Mexico. Throughout South America, serpents were depicted with feathers, perhaps suggesting that they could fly. In ancient mythology of native Australians teach that humans are created by the dreams of a lizard. Egypt and Sumer also had their reptile deities. And ancient legends and works of art from around the globe clearly depict reptile-type people, such as the Nagas or snake people in India. Even today, snake symbolism is so abundant, you hardly notice it. and depictions in pop culture of super smart reptiles are common. And according to my whistleblowers, it's not just one race of these guys, there's several.
There's 6 or 7 types of reptilians that are on this planet. Some snakes, some velociraptor looking, some actually look like dinosaurs.
Mars Marine Randy Kramer also describes encountering natively evolved reptoids on Mars.
If we're either evolved or genetically, altered from primates, they are evolved or genetically altered from, little rock lizards.
So it turns out that if aliens ever show up here on Earth, a new study indicates that they'll probably be more like super intelligent dinosaurs, as smart and as cunning as humans. We would be better off not meeting them.
You see, most of the hubbub regarding the reptilian conspiracy centers around a race of vicious warlike creatures known as the Draco. They aren't really reptilian. Instead, they're higher dimensional beings that prefer to manifest themselves in this dimension as scary-ass dragon people.
The Draconians themselves did not evolve as a life form in our universe. They were dumped here. They're just a pain. They're incredibly smart, they're incredibly psychic, they're incredible builders, but they're bullies.
They're bullies, and they have a arrogant bully attitude.
Their whole thing is control. Whenever you see one, you ought to just run like hell.
But since they're so crafty, they tend not to battle with the human race directly.
You have the Dracos influencing the president of your country.
Okay, so are we talking Eisenhower, Truman, who are talking, all of them?
Yeah, all of them.
By the time Eisenhower stepped into office, the draconian system had already infiltrated the 3-letter organizations, and eventually defense-related projects got infiltrated as technology exchanges took place.
In fact, for millennia, they've been able to exert their will over the whole of humanity by working through human or semi-human proxies, usually members of elite families who hold high positions of power.
You have to use the front human form to do it.
Yeah,
because it's too shocking otherwise. In this consciousness of the human stream that's here now is so used to just seeing and being told that the human being is at the top of the food chain and we're the rulers of this and that and we're that it's too shocking to bring in a new species and do it. It's not conducive to keep the control.
Which brings us to the trait that they're most known for.
They have the ability to shift and look like a human.
It's a misconception that they are actually shape-shifting. Some are, but what they're actually doing is altering your visual cortex to make you think you're seeing them that way.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
The shape-shifting is just one of those extra things that makes this story sound so silly for most of us. Normally I would agree, if it weren't for the fact that the reptile changing into human archetype has been with us for quite a while. This too is ever present in our culture today. Has anyone asked why? Why shape-shifting reptiles are everywhere? Even children's shows, like the Dino Squad, which features shape-shifting teenagers fighting crime. Is it all just a big coincidence? Or are insiders purposely leaking this stuff into the culture? Do they know who's really calling the shots?
The enemy isn't human at all, but it's pushing all our buttons so that we're so busy looking at each other and so neurotic about each other that we're not looking at the real reality here, the real cause, which is another race or races that are here who are totally playing games with us, feeding off our energy and hoping that we destroy ourselves so that they can keep the planet for themselves.
These beings are foreign. They're from another universe, and so for them to be able to be here, they kind of utilize us as a food source and
we say
exist.
they're utilizing us as a food source. Is that as an energetic food source or as a physical? Are they eating
both
humans?
They're carnivorous.
Are you saying carnivorous, they eat humans?
Yes. They won't eat a dead human. It has to be alive at the time of the killing. Their preference is children.
100,000 children, totally unaccountable through FBI archives, cannot be traced anywhere.
You know, Westchester County, in the last 5 years, 3,000 children in Westchester County, New York, have vanished without a trace. Where are they going?
Nobody's ever seen them. I think they're hauled underneath in some of these bases and they are summarily done away with and they are literally eaten.
These children were food. And I'm supposed to just shut up and not say anything about it because people don't want to hear it? That's tough. That's tough.
And yet, This idea is also backed up by thousands of years of artistic depictions of reptiles consuming people. But if this were actually taking place on a large scale, then it might explain some of the strange anomalies with some of these missing person cases.
Every year, hundreds of people are reported missing in national parks and forests, many of them children. But a small percentage of the cases have search and rescue crews continuing to scratch their heads.
The year 1997 set a record for missing persons in the United States, with a staggering number of almost 1 million reported missing, just in that year alone. Now, I'm not saying that all of them wound up as lizard food, but clusters of missing person cases, especially near national parks, are quite bizarre. Former Police Chief David Politis now spends his life trying to get to the bottom of these strange disappearances.
So if there's mental illness, we probably won't touch it. If it's a voluntary disappearance, we won't touch it. If there's evidence of animal or human predation, we won't touch it. And they're either going to find you there, or they're going to find pieces of you there, and they're going to find drag marks there. And then the canines that are brought in are going to be able to track your scent exactly to where the body is.
In Politis' documentary, Missing 411, presents many strange anomalies associated with these cases.
In a lot of these cases, search and rescue, or the volunteers searching people, have already gone over certain areas, not once, not twice, but even dozens of times. And then the child is found there, maybe a year, maybe a few years later.
There's some cases where little kids are alleged to have walked up to 20 miles overnight, or climbed phenomenal heights, 3,000 and 4,000 feet. Those are facts, and it's highly, highly hard to believe.
There are groups within the higher echelon that are actually helping them. That's part of the deal. They won't come up as long as we feed them down there. You understand? It's about human beings selling themselves out.
But is there any evidence of this? Anything to suggest that it's more than just an imaginative horror story? Well, perhaps the next time you're in Oslo, Norway, you should take a stroll through the peaceful Frogner Park. You'll probably notice a statue garden, all designed by famed Swedish sculptor Gustav Winglet, who is best known for designing the Nobel Peace Prize. And perhaps you might notice something unsettling about these statues. Perhaps a message hidden in plain sight. A message that they knew you would never understand the meaning of.
This is where the battle is, between light and dark. You've got the grays over us, you've got the reptilians underneath us, and between us you've got humanity, sandwiched in the middle, wondering what the hell is going on here.
As improbable as it seems, if these whistleblowers and the many others who tell similar stories are right, then we are pawns in a cosmic game that is played out largely without our knowledge. However, that soon may come to an end, because the world is literally sitting on a powder keg that, once it finally blows, will force us to look at everything in a very different way. Centuries after its official discovery, the continent of Antarctica has basically just sat there, with the public at large paying very little interest. However, for anybody willing to look past the official history of Antarctica, you'll find a steady trickle of strange legend and physically documentable evidence that makes Antarctica the prime candidate as a catalyst for widespread disclosure. Since the early 2000s, rumors of something big going on in Antarctica have been bubbling up on internet chat rooms and forums, something that believers say is big enough to attract interest among notable names of the world elite. Just days after the heads of the Roman Catholic and Russian Orthodox churches met for the very first time in 1,000 years, Patriarch Kirill of the Russian Orthodox Church went to Antarctica. Officially, it was to bless the land. Even more odd, Secretary of State John Kerry visited Antarctica on the day of the 2016 elections, on arguably the most important day ever for his party. There's also speculation that Obama visited during his trip to Argentina, and many others secretly visited during Nelson Mandela's funeral. Trump sent Newt Gingrich. Prince Harry visited in a PR event for wounded vets. There's also the King and Queen of Spain. Putin expressed an interest in going a number of times. 33rd degree Mason and second man on the moon Buzz Aldrin visited, where he had to be medically evac'd after suffering heart issues. But it's not just high-profile figures. Since the mid-2000s, several very large corporations have also drastically increased their interest and investment in the continent, even posting several new job openings for engineers, food, and energy suppliers. However, many conspiracy theorists believe that there was something fishy behind these sudden visits, when the fitness app Strava revealed a heat map of their users' activity based on GPS. An unusually high amount of activity was reported at what would normally be empty and remote locations on the continent. Why would this be? Is there something more that meets the eye going on here? But strange stories coming from the continent are nothing new. Many believe that the Nazis installed secret submarine bases under the ice when they laid claims to large swaths of land just prior to World War II, and moved many of their secret projects there just before Germany fell.
There are large tunnels underneath the water all around Antarctica where the Germans had been taking facilities from Germany to Antarctica, the facilities in Antarctica.
And while hard proof of this is hard to come by, many such believers point to the time that the United States military actually launched an invasion of Antarctica in 1946-47, a year or so after the war ended. Although the mission's stated goal was to establish a research base, what was launched was nothing short of a small invasion armada, a fleet with over 4,700 heavily armed servicemen, and an aircraft carrier with over 30 planes. A bit of overkill just to establish a research station, right? Although the operation failed to reach its objectives, citing bad weather, many believers in the conspiracy claim that the US military actually retreated after suffering huge losses, after being attacked with advanced technology that the Nazis were developing.
Every aircraft we had were eliminated in about 20 minutes. Those ships and all those personnel were sunk. So Admiral Byrd and Admiral Nimitz, with the tail between their legs, took off back to the United States as fast as they could go.
According to conspiracy lore, deals were eventually cut and hostilities cooled as more and more Nazi scientists and intelligence operatives were given key US government positions under Operation Paperclip. Today, much of the continent is under control of the US and Russian militaries, and access is pretty much denied to anyone without military authorization. This includes its airspace to all commercial craft. Even the lucky few who have been given permission to explore the continent recreationally are required to stay in predetermined boundaries, and there have even been claims that some cross-country hikers and skiers have been intercepted at gunpoint for venturing off course. Perhaps they don't want unauthorized visitors to see the many, many strange formations that no doubt litter the ice. Although touted to be a barren land never inhabited by man, there are many cases of intelligent design popping up all over the place. These are especially apparent on Google Earth, where they actually went out of their way to censor random landscape features. And these aren't just stitching errors. Someone clearly had to single out these areas and manually obscure them. Even this one, which looked like a 200-foot wide opening in the earth, before it was eventually blurred out. And who knows how many of these mysterious structures will remain visible until they too are censored before our eyes. Perhaps this will be the next to go. A strange metallic-looking dome covering an opening that goes deep into the earth, with no roads and no other signs of habitation nearby. What the fuck could this thing be? And just what are these signals being shot to and from Antarctica that were picked up by satellites measuring global microwave radiation? It almost looks like some form of microwave warfare. The information coming out of Antarctica is in fact so obvious and so clear that it can't be covered up forever. But whether Antarctica will be the avenue in which larger, more important truths will be disclosed is yet to be known. However, these truths are worth fighting for, because the deeper the secrets kept from us, the further we are from claiming a heritage and a history that is rightfully ours. This is our world, and this is a world that we need to master. Even if it's a world that's more magical and even more scary than you can ever